This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
AVS Media
Tower,
Demo.
Papa Hotel, Lima Echo November radio check.
Papa Echo November, good afternoon, read you 5.
Good afternoon, read you 5 as well, Papa Echo November.
The X-Zone radio and TV show is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X-Zone radio and TV show or in any manner endorsed by Rob McConnell, Relmar McConnell Media Company, Talkstar Radio Network, its affiliated stations, or employees.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X-Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome back to the X-Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell, coming to you from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Worldwide toll-free, 1-800-610-7035. Email xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On MSN Messenger, xzoneradiotv@hotmail.com, and our website, www.xzoneradiotv.com. X-Zone Nation, my guest this hour is Brian Touhy. He's best known as the author of The Fix Is In, the showbiz manipulations of the NFL, MLB, NBA, NHL, and NASCAR, which was published by Feral House in 2010. The book gained national and international attention as it was reviewed by the Wall Street Journal, the nationally syndicated The Bookworm Says, The Independent in the United Kingdom, and Milwaukee's The Shepherd Express, among others. Touhy conducted over 100 interviews on radio stations across the United States and Canada promoting the book. And we're going to be talking to Brian tonight about his new book entitled Disaster Government, which was researched and written in the period of over 3 years. What began as a hobby, according to Brian, morphed into one of the only books written on the subject of the continuity of government programs available. It's based on the federal government's own files, many of which were obtained via the Freedom of Information Act. And joining me now is Brian Touhy. And Brian, welcome to the X-Zone.
It's good to be on. Thanks for having me, Rob.
Tell me, Brian, what was your inspiration, motivation for writing your newest book?
Well, it was researched because it was a book I wanted to read and no one seemed to want to write. So I started digging into this subject matter, and I was always interested in conspiracy theories and that sort of thing. And the more I dug into this, the more I was concerned actually about what I found, and decided if no one else is going to write this book, I guess I'm going to have to be the one to do it.
The name of your book is Disaster Government, and is there a set definition for disaster government, or should it be referred to as a national emergency?
Well, I named it disaster government because it concerns itself with all matters of disaster, be it war, be it a terrorist attack, be it a natural disaster. But
Right.
national emergency is one of the main things it covers, and national emergency is an ill-defined term. It actually has no clear definition, and I think many people in America would be surprised over what really is a national emergency, because it's not what you think it is. It's not a hurricane. It's not an earthquake. It is conditions in Zimbabwe. It's the conditions in Belarus. It's the conditions in North Korea. It's a lot of things
Hold
that
on here.
actually
Hold
don't
on here.
affect us
How can that be a
specifically.
national emergency if it's not within the United States?
That's the very strange part of it all. What I think it goes back to is Ronald Reagan's administration defined it best when they called it a national security emergency. And basically that meant anything that threatened national security. But that term has really been dropped since his time. And now it's just a national emergency. And it's really whatever the president decides is a national emergency becomes a national emergency.
You and I have so much to talk about this hour. Brian, please stand by. Exonation Brian Touhy is our special guest. We're talking to Brian about his new book, Disaster Government. His website is, you ready? disastergovernment.com. Brian and I will be back on the other side of this 2-minute commercial break as the X-Zone continues. Where? Right here from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada on the Talkstar Radio Network, X-Zone Broadcast Network, UK High Definition Radio, Euro High Definition Radio, Star Cable, and Turquoise Radio, and independent broadcasters right across Canada, the United States, Central America, South America, the Caribbean, the Pacific Rim, Asia, India, Africa, and Europe. You can always listen to the X-Zone radio show, 724-365 on high definition stereo at www.xzoneradiotv.com/listen.htm. Brian Touhy's my guest. This is the X-Zone. Brian and I return on the other side of this break. Don't go away. Modern Esoteric, Beyond Our Senses by Brad Olson, consummates the lifeology story about where humanity originates. It is the lost continents, the primitive wisdom, the mythos of creation, and the rethinking of ancient history as we are taught in academia. There is much more to the story than what we have been told. As this is the first book in the Esoteric series, Modern Esoteric starts at the beginning of time and accelerates up to this modern age. Future Esoteric is book 2 in the series and takes a forward-looking position ahead of today with an open and honest examination of the ET issue and various unexplained phenomena. To discover the writings of author Brad Olson, visit www.bradolson.com. That's www.bradolson.com. Named one of the world's greatest psychics, Elizabeth Joyce is now giving readings worldwide via Skype. Elizabeth Joyce is recognized for her clairvoyant ability to help find missing persons, her analysis of dreams, past life regression work, mediumship, and her accurate predictions. Elizabeth has been a frequent guest on the X-Zone radio show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, now for several years. For an appointment with Elizabeth Joyce, call 201-934-8986 or Skype at elizabeth.joyce. And for more information, you can always visit Elizabeth Joyce online at www.new-visions.com.
Do you have a dis-ease that you would like to alleviate through a natural means? Have you been contacted by angels, ghosts, or even extraterrestrials and want to validate these experiences? Or would you simply like to speak with someone who can help you find your life's purpose? I'm Dr. Joseph Mara, and I'm offering my services free of charge for first-time clients contacting me during the month of April. These free consultations include angel card readings, guided meditations, life coaching, and energy healing. If you have always wanted to explore these types of experiences but were skeptical or simply could not afford them, then take advantage of this free special offer. Contact me through my website, a guiding light spelled LITE.com to schedule your consultation today. Until then, I offer you love, light, and laughter.
Welcome back, everyone. Brian Touhy is my special guest. We're talking to Brian about his new book. It is entitled Disaster Government, National Emergencies, Continuity of Government, and You. His website is www.disastergovernment.com. Now, Brian, I must say that you kind of threw me when you said that national emergency really has nothing to do with what's going on in the United States in many cases.
In every case, actually, that's the really strange part of it all, is you would think something that's a national emergency would actually affect the nation, but that's not the case. Really what it is, it's something that threatens national security and allows basically the president and the federal government even to act outside of constitutional bounds.
Wow. So how many national emergencies is the U.S. currently operating under?
Shockingly, 25 at my last count. There's 25 separate national emergencies, and some of them are even, like 9/11. The events of 9/11 are still a national emergency today. So, I mean, there's a lot of strange things that are considered national emergencies. Like I said before, the conditions in Zimbabwe are a national emergency. The conditions in Iran are, the conditions in North Korea. But it's nothing that affect people here in the United States. I mean, it's not the economy, it's not the jobless rate, it's none of those things. All these strange outside of interests.
So it seems like this is a little built-in clause that the government can use at its own discretion without having to report to the public what it's doing or why.
Exactly. In fact, there's laws on the books, and I explain this in the book, that allows the president to spend over and above any budgetary constraints to combat a national emergency. So, example, again, 9/11 is still a national emergency here 12 years after the fact. Well, if we're fighting this war on terrorism, you can do so outside of budgetary constraints because it's a national emergency. So he doesn't have to report about how much money is being spent on this supposed national emergency, even as it's ongoing today.
So what a national emergency under this blanket, let's talk about 9/11 for a second, the continuation of the national emergency clause when it comes to 9/11 and the fight against terrorism. Could this be looked at as a black op budget?
Quite possibly, yes. Because, again, it does not have to be reported to Congress or to anyone, for that matter, until the national emergency comes to an end. Well, the funny thing is many of these national emergencies don't come to an end. Like in the case of this 9/11 one, it keeps getting renewed. And, in fact, they the Congress passed a law in 1976 called the National Emergency Act, which was supposed to curtail this and limit every national emergency to the length of 1 year unless it was renewed by a president. Well, what the president does today is they just keep renewing these national emergencies all the time. So many of the national emergencies that Bush enacted, Obama has continued in his administration. Nothing has changed. They just keep renewing them. Therefore, they don't have to admit how much money is being spent supposedly combating these supposed emergencies.
To the best of your knowledge, doing the research that you've done, how many national emergencies, and I'm putting that in quotation marks, have actually been stopped, concluded, brought to an end?
Not many. What really started this National Emergency Act in 1976 was the fact that Congress realized that a national emergency that FDR had initiated in 1933 was still ongoing. That the national emergency in 1950 that Truman initiated, which was the Korean War, was still technically ongoing. And then there was two that Nixon initiated in the early 70s that were also ongoing. So Congress suddenly realized, oh, wait, we can't be operating under an emergency government, basically, and said, we're going to put a stop to it, and then they passed the law. But then the number of national emergencies exploded after the law was passed, and it's gotten out of control, and Congress never took that power back.
So tell me this. Why hasn't this been brought up during any presidential campaign by any member of the media to question this and, to kind of bring into play the justification of spending all this money outside of the United States when there are so many people within the United States who could actually use this funding?
Honestly, it's because I don't think anybody realizes it's not going on. I think that's the main reason it's not questioned. I mean, you think something called a national emergency would require people standing on, the White House lawn urgently reporting what's going on and how we're combating this emergency, but that's not the case.
You'd think so.
So I think really what it is, yeah, exactly. But nobody realizes these things are ongoing or have been ongoing, and therefore I don't think they realize the consequences of them. They don't even understand the powers available to the president, which are really overreaching powers if he chooses to put them into effect.
I would imagine that if a new president coming in was to stir the pot by canceling a national emergency, there'd be a lot of explaining that would have to be done. So is it better for
someone?
So is it better for the president to say, I know it's there, but I'm not going to touch it?
I think so. I mean, that's the only reason I can imagine why Obama, again, would basically renew everything that President Bush did in terms of national emergencies. He never let one slip and end like it should have. They all were renewed. So I got to imagine that's the reasoning, is there's some sort of internal, problem that they want to be able to allow it to just keep rolling. Again, I think it's because of the budgetary constraints. It allows them to spend over and above what they normally could.
Exxon Nation, Brian Touhy is our guest this hour. We're talking to Brian about his new book. It's entitled Disaster Government, National Emergencies, Continuity of Government and You. His website is www.disastergovernment.com. Brian, what is posse comitatus?
Well, posse comitatus is one thing that a lot of people here in America are worried about, and that is basically it's a law that prevents the military from acting as a police force amongst the citizens. And basically, posse comitatus can be thrown out the window in the event of martial law being declared.
So you could actually have the National Guard in law enforcement roles as well. Haven't we seen that in the past without martial law being declared?
Well, the National Guard is allowed around posse comitatus. There's a couple exceptions. So one of them is the National Guard.
Okay.
They're allowed, as we've seen after like a hurricane or an earthquake, to act as a police force to help basically maintain the peace and help people and that sort of thing. Another way around it is the Coast Guard is allowed to protect the borders and act as a police force. The Navy and the Air Force are actually allowed to protect the borders and act as a police force in cases of the war on drugs.
Right.
So, I mean, there are things around it, but the specific is, and it dates back from after the Civil War when the Northern Army occupied the South, basically. That's why the law was passed, to get the Northern troops out. And that's what it is today, is it's trying to keep the Army from becoming a police force. But at the same time, as we saw in Boston recently, the Army can train, the Army can equip, and the Army can make the police force look like the Army is today. And that gets a lot of people, I think, on edge.
How easy is it for the federal government to step around the posse comitatus and institute martial law?
It's actually quite easy. In fact, all they have to do is and I explain this in the book how easy it is the president can enact basically what's called the Insurrection Act, which means in case of a rebellion against the government, or really if people are just being lawless,
right,
the president can issue an announcement basically and say, hey, if you guys don't stop this, I'm going to send the troops in. And if the people don't stop it within his self-imposed time frame, then he can legally send in the troops. And we saw that happen again here in the United States, like with the Rodney King riots. The police force was overwhelmed. They sent to the National Guard. They were overwhelmed. First President Bush, issued an order saying cease and desist. When that didn't happen, he sent in the military, and within 3 days, everything was back to normal.
We mentioned briefly, and it's in the title of your book, Continuity of Government. What is that?
Basically, it's the government's plans to save itself in case of a nuclear war is really kind of why they were begun. If the government is going to protect us, their reasoning is they have to save themselves first. And then once they're safely ensconced in some underground bunker or something to that effect, then they will turn around and help us and save the rest of us from whatever disaster has befallen the nation.
Somehow that doesn't make sense.
No, it's not very comforting either, I don't think, because what we've essentially done, I think, as voters here is we've made our president the almost designated survivor for all of us. He's the one that if the worst case scenario comes to pass, the government's going to do all they can to save the president, his administration, maybe Congress, maybe the Supreme Court, but not likely. And that's what's going to survive here in the United States.
Are you expecting to get any flack from the government for your book, A Disaster Government?
I don't think so, because everything that's in there is really straight out of their own files, and it's straight out of their own laws. I mean, I quote everything fairly extensively, so I'm not cherry picking. I'm not, what some conspiracy theorists I think do is, they'll just pull out one little quote out of a big document and say, oh, this explains all of that. Well, I try to provide as much evidence as I can that says, look, I'm not making this stuff up. This is literally what the federal government's going to do in the worst case scenario. This is what the powers they have awarded themselves are, and much of it has been given over. The power has been given by Congress to the president to act over and above his constitutional limits. And it's kind of ironic because the idea of continuity government is something they call enduring constitutional government. But the fact is, when a disaster happens, they're basically going to throw the Constitution out and do whatever they think is necessary to basically save the United States. But that's not really saving the Constitution. I mean, it's a double-edged sword, and there's no way around it.
Brian, stand by. You and I have to take our news break at the bottom of the hour. Exonation, Brian Touhy is our special guest. Interesting hour. www.disastergovernment.com, and the name of Brian's book is Disaster Government, a National Emergencies, Continuity of Government. And you and Brian and I will be back on the other side of this news break as we continue here in the X Zone from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. The X-Chronicles newspaper is available online with the compliments of our advertisers at www.xchronicles-newspaper.com/newspaperstand.htm. Brian Touhy is my guest. We'll both be back on the other side of this commercial break. My name is Rob McConnell. Don't go away. Are you considering calling a psychic to read your situation? Then consider David Champion, a psychic medium for more than 20 years with thousands of readings under his belt. David Champion will make you feel comfortable. He has proven to be honest and accurate. He's a straight shooter. There's no guesswork. What he sees is what you get. While he is a medium, most of the calls focus on relationships, not only love, but work, school, neighbors, and more. Need help with finding a job and preparing for the interview? Are you dealing with people who are obstacles in your path? For more information, go to davidchampion.com, $1.50 per minute paid by credit card with a minimum of 30 minutes. For your reading with David Champion, call 1-877-702-8598. That's 1-877-702-8598. Now you can dial in to listen to the X Zone radio show from anywhere in the world with Rob McConnell 24/7, 365 by dialing 213-401-0080. That's 213-401-0080. If you have a mobile phone or landline, the X Zone radio show with Rob McConnell is now at your beck and call at 213-401-0080. That's 213-401-0080, 24/7, 365. You're listening to the X Zone Radio Show, live and around the world on the Talkstar Radio Network, X Zone Broadcast Network, UK High Definition Radio, Euro High Definition Radio, and Star Cable. Our toll-free telephone number worldwide is 1-800-610-7035. Our email address, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On MSN Messenger, xzoneradiotv@hotmail.com, and our website, www.xzoneradiotv.com. And welcome back to the X Zone, everyone. Brian Touhy is my guest this hour. We're talking to Brian about his new book, Disaster Government, National Emergencies, Continuity of Government, and You. His website is www.disastergovernment.com. Brian, we talked before the break about how, the president and those privileged few in Washington, in the case of, let's say, a nuclear threat or an impending strike, they'd be taken to some safe place and, they'd only emerge once the crisis was over. Now, would they be going to some of the underground bases that we've heard of that the federal government has? And if so, Brian, what's inside these very secretive underground bases?
Well, technically, yes, they would be going to places that we know about. There's one called Raven Rock, there's one called Mount Weather, and there's a few others scattered about in and around the Washington, D.C. area. And these, from reports, are basically underground cities.
Wow.
I mean, complete with buildings. One supposedly has an underground railway system within it, underground lake. And, I mean, there are very large facilities that can hold a few thousand people and feed them and keep them going for 6 months to a year without any outside influence whatsoever. The problem is with, like, Mount Weather and Raven Rock is we know about them. So if I know about them and can write about them and you know about them and other people know about them, then they're not very useful, which means in some place, there's probably even bigger, more elaborate underground bases that nobody knows about because that's the point of them. No one's supposed to know about them.
Let me ask you this. Where does FEMA fit into this entire scenario?
FEMA, for a very long time, was in charge of continuity government operations, and they still kind of are, but it's been handed over to the Department of Homeland Security, which swallowed them, which is why I think FEMA is so mixed up. When people get angry about FEMA because they don't respond well in a natural disaster like a hurricane or a flood or something of that nature, it's because FEMA itself is confused. The money and the funding for FEMA is they never know if they should put it toward terrorism or if they should put it toward a natural disaster. And it seems like every time they put the money toward terrorism, then you have something like Hurricane Katrina happens. And then FEMA flip-flops and puts everything into national disaster, and then something like 9/11 happens. And they just don't know what to do. And they're very ill-equipped, and they're very ill-prepared, really, because of this crazy mindset.
It seems, Brian, that there's a total lack of communication within the government. For example, the two suspects in the Boston Marathon bombing. You've got the Russian Secret Service contacting the FBI, tipping them off. The FBI kind of drags their heels on it, while the CIA has already done investigations on it, and the Department of Homeland Security and Border Protection Services have them on one computer system but not on another.
Well, it's too much of a bureaucracy. I mean, that's really the biggest problem is they can't they can't communicate because there's too much information, there's too many people involved, and they can't make heads or tails out of this stuff. It's concerning. I mean, it's really concerning that supposedly, if they have the ability to tap every phone call and they read every email and follow every text message and all that, then we get the sense that they know everything. But the fact is, it seems like they know very little. And what they stop, they almost stop on accident. I mean, it's not. And in fact, in many places in the United States, actually, when they've stopped supposed terrorism, it's because the FBI was actually feeding the supposed terrorists what they needed to operate and giving them fake bombs and basically setting them up and then saying, oh, look, we captured a terrorist, when they almost created the terrorists themselves.
So in your opinion, how could this be solved? Like,
really strip back the government is really what they need to do. Is really, I mean, you thin it out. I mean, like with FEMA, for example. There's 6,000 employees for FEMA, and supposedly they're going to help in a natural disaster. Well, we saw Superstorm Sandy hit New York, where literally tens of millions of people were affected.
Yeah.
But guess what? If you sent all 6,000 of them to New York, there wouldn't be enough to help. 6,000 people can't help 10 million.
Yeah.
And the federal government wants to be, the father for us all. They want to be the first responders in the case of a natural disaster. Well, they're not going to be the first responders. The local people, fire, police, rescue, those are going to be the first responders. So stop funding these federal agencies that really are useless, that really don't help, and put that money instead into local communities and into local entities that can help. And then you'd start solving problems.
You would have thought, you would have thought that after Katrina, they would have got their act together. However, we saw with Hurricane Sandy, wrong. Like they don't learn.
No, and because they're not equipped to do this. Again, you can't have 6,000 help 10 million, and you can't have enough water, food, and shelter on hand for 10 million people. You just can't. And that's the way it is. And I mean, I write about it in the book too. I talk about, pandemic flu, because there's been several documents that they made available relating to pandemic flus and how they're going to respond to them. And you read through these things, and you should get the little sense of fear, because, what they think is going to stop the flu probably isn't going to stop the flu, and it's going to take months, if not longer, to create a vaccine. And in the meantime, if it's a really highly contagious flu, like they've been talking about ones that are emerging in China recently, we're all in a little bit of trouble. And then that's when people start panicking, and then that's when they start throwing in quarantines, and that's when you start seeing martial law declared, and that's when you see, chaos break out, unfortunately.
Well, wouldn't this be a good scenario to implement national emergency now, so that they can work with the Chinese in order to stop the pandemic that is being anticipated in the United States and the rest of North America? Like, to me, that would make sense.
You would think so.
Yeah.
You would think so. I mean, Obama did declare the swine flu that broke out a couple of years a national emergency.
Yeah.
He did do that, and that was one that actually ended after a year. That's one they allowed to lapse and end.
Wow.
So by declaring it a national emergency, it allowed the Department of Health and Human Services to, up their budget and do more in preventing and, vaccinations and that sort of thing. So, I mean, they were actually kind of Johnny on the spot with that one. It just wasn't that threatening of a flu. If something really threatening, really contagious, really deadly broke out, we'd probably see a different type of scenario.
Going through the material that you sent us, I came across the Eisenhower 10. Who were they?
It's a really interesting story that President Eisenhower, I supposedly nobody really but Eisenhower knew this. He sent out 10 letters to 10 heads of business, basically, and informed them in the event of a nuclear war or some sort of disaster that eliminated the federal government, these 10 people were now going to be in charge of the country. On his own, he just basically deputized these people to run the country if the federal government was gone.
So he had his own little posse planned.
Exactly. And and it's funny because I include one of the letters in my book so people can read it. I mean, it's basically like a form letter. Like, thanks for your, willingness to do this. Here's going to be your job title. This is what you can do. And this letter says you can do it because it's signed by me. And when the Kennedy administration found out about it, they kind of flipped out. But then apparently they continued it. And the question is it continued to this day? Because if Eisenhower did it and Kennedy continued it, who's to say it's not being continued on now? And who knows who might be tapped to run the government if it got wiped out?
So what do? Just pick 10 people out of the phone book?
I don't know exactly why he chose the 10 he did, but they were kind of captain's industry. And it's interesting, out of the 10 jobs that were assigned, one of them was censorship. I think the guy he assigned that to was, I think he was president of CBS Television at the time, and his job was going to be head of Office of Censorship. Now, amazingly, you would think we'd have more important jobs that need to be done than censorship, but I guess not in the government.
Well, somebody's got to censor what the rest of the world is getting, I guess.
Apparently.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know why that was chosen, but that was one of the jobs.
Brian, what do you think people should know about the federal government's plan to save its citizens in the event of an emergency?
They're not going to save you. That's the scary part. Their job, they even tell you, if you go to the federal government, and FEMA has actually done some pretty good job in terms of designing pamphlets and ideas for basically preparing yourself and saving yourself in the event of a disaster. But one thing they do not do a good job at all, in my opinion, is they flat out tell you, we will not be there for you for at least 72 hours, for 3 days. So if, the hurricane's coming, an earthquake, whatever, the federal government's not going to be there for at least 3 days. And you need to be prepared to fend for yourself for those 3 days at least. And as we've seen, 3 days may actually easily be a week or more before they really do show up.
So
because
the government,
of their convoluted bureaucratic plans.
So the government is saying, hey guys, if you need us, we'll be there after we're sure that there's no more danger. But until then, you guys have got to buckle up and take one for the Gipper.
Exactly. That's exactly what they're telling you. But the thing, like I said, the thing is, they don't make that very well known. I mean, all of this money that they spend, into FEMA, into preventing terrorism, into the Department of Homeland Security, one of the things I bring up in my book is the fact that, 3,000 people unfortunately lost their lives on 9/11.
Yeah.
Well, in the United States, 3,000 people die every year from home fires. Okay, now if you took some of that money that goes to prevent terrorism and gave everybody in the United States a fire extinguisher and a couple of smoke detectors, I think we'd save a lot more lives. But that's not where the money goes, because that's not very sexy, but that's the way it is. And I think the federal government could do a lot better if they want to stick their nose into the business of being the first responders, of actually being the first responders and using that money wisely.
But isn't it also the responsibility of all citizens in the United States to actually keep a watch on what the government is doing? After all, they have the power through the voting system to make changes. And I think that what has happened over the year, Brian, is that people have forgotten that it's not I the person, but we the people, and that they can make a difference. But they've got to unite, and I think this is one of the biggest problems today. There are too many factions, too many parties, too many directions.
Oh, I would agree with you 100% on that. I mean, if people really have a problem with the government, they're the ones who can change it. I mean, I've heard there's been a lot of talk recently about, potential new revolution and, people rising up and all that. And, the federal government, just to inform those people who think that's the solution, again, with this Insurrection Act that's available to the president, they will unleash the army upon any sort of revolutionary force. And, you may have a hunting rifle and a handgun, that's great, but that's not going to help you when the tanks are rolling down the street. Okay? So the best way to change is to stop voting for Republicans, Democrats, because they're the ones who've created this problem. If you start going outside of that, start voting third-party independent candidates, maybe you actually will see some sort of change that will benefit us all. Or at least if you're going to vote Republican and Democrat, at least do it wisely. Don't just do it blindly and select a Democrat because he is a Democrat and I've always voted Democrat. I mean, it's stuff like that I think, like you say, is really fractioned this country apart.
During the Quebec crisis in the 60s in Montreal with the FLQ, which is a terrorist group, I'm from Montreal, and I remember very well the War Measures Act being implemented by then Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau. And it was necessary in order to protect government buildings, to protect the power plants, to protect the citizens. In that case, it worked because of the bombings and everything else that was going on. When the imminent danger was over, the War Measures Act was repealed. It was done in a timely fashion. So I can understand the importance of having something like this, but I certainly would not want to see any government abuse its power, because they're only hurting themselves and the people that have so much faith and trust in them.
Well, I think you're exactly right. If they do implement something like martial law, for example, you hope they do it for a good reason, and that's to protect the people, stop criminals or the lawlessness that's going on. But the way everything is set up, it's really set up for a legal overthrow of the government, if that's the way somebody chose. So the thing is when you give up those rights, when you allow them to have martial law and implement it, are they going to be nice and stop? Or are they going to take it the other way and literally take over?
Food for thought. Brian Touhy is my special guest. We'll be back on the other side of this commercial break, External Nation. Brian's book is entitled Disaster Government, National Emergencies, Continuity of Government, and You. His website, www.disastergovernment.com. We'll be back on the other side of this commercial break. My name is Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone. Don't go away. With each new extreme weather event or terrorist act, it becomes increasingly obvious that we live in uncertain and challenging times. We all buy car insurance. Why not collapse and catastrophe insurance? Matthew Stein, an MIT-trained engineer and green builder, has written 2 outstanding books to help people prepare, plan for, and deal with everything from minor situations lasting a few days to full-on collapse. Matt's first book, When Technology Fails, is a manual for self-reliance, sustainable living, and surviving the long emergency. This massive book covers the gamut from first aid and emergency preparedness to alternative healing, renewable energy, primitive living skills, and 18th century technologies that could be critical to your comfort and survival in a long-lasting crisis. Matt's second book, When Disaster Strikes, is a comprehensive emergency preparedness handbook and survival guide. When Disaster Strikes is an essential item for every family's go bag. Both books are available at all usual sources. There's a wealth of totally free information posted at whentechfails.com, and author-signed copies may be purchased at mattstein.com. That's www.whentechfails.com and www.mattstein.com. Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God. And finally, after the worship of many gods, they conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com.
Well, I just got back from Roswell, where the aliens have been. And if you ask the feds the cause, well, they'll only lie again. Now I'm hunted by the gumshoes, and I'm wanted by the cops, 'cause they think that I might be the guy making circles in the crops. And I know that there's a conspiracy from the voices in my head. Elvis lives, that's clear to me. It's McCartney who is dead. And if the Mars man should come again and take me, I will go. I will take a trip on their rocket ship. God bless the UFO. Give JFK this message. It's the Cuban Army's fault. And I know that Dave Koresh is alive inside a vault. We've seen reports in papers of a guy who knows about a car that runs on chewing gum, but the Arabs rubbed him out. And we loudly warn that America is badly unprepared. With the Cold War through, we need something new that can get you good and scared. Do you wonder just who is warning you of conspiracies today? We're the ones who fill the rumor mill. We are the CIA.
All right, Brian Touhy is my guest of this hour. He is the author of Disaster Government, National Emergencies, Continuity of Government, and You. His website is www.disastergovernment.com. First of all, Brian, thanks a million for being with us. Super hour, a lot of information, and I hope people go to your website and find out more. But we're coming down to the end of the show in this segment in a couple of minutes here. I'd just like to ask you about your book entitled The Fix Is In, the showbiz manipulation of the NFL, MLB, NBA, NHL, and NASCAR. Tell me, is the fix really in the sporting industry?
Yeah, I actually believe that the professional sports leagues will and have and can fix their own sporting events to get the best TV ratings, to create the best storylines, and basically to get people watching, because that's what makes all the money for them today.
It's ridiculous. You know, for a mom and dad to take their two kids to see a professional sporting event, it's what, $300-400?
Can be, depending where you want to sit, sure.
Yeah,
but I think what it is today, a lot of it, like for the NFL, for example, makes over $6 billion a year on television. And the NHL makes about $1 billion a year on television. Major League Baseball, $3 billion a year on television. They don't need people in the seats. They need people watching at home. They need that advertising money. They need that TV money to keep thriving. And I believe in order to do that, they like a reality television show, which isn't as real as people want it to believe.
Oh, tell me about those, eh?
Professional sports aren't as real as you want them to believe, because it's not illegal, at least here in the United States, for a league to fix its own game. They can do so perfectly legally and do it as often as they would like. I don't think every game is fixed, but I believe several of them have been, because of that need to get people watching and to create storylines.
Brian, do you think we've got less than 40 seconds of our producers telling me, do you think that the wrestling industry was the cat that brought all these dead mice to the counter?
Potentially. I mean, I think actually a lot of these leagues figured that out in the 1960s, because that's when television really started to take off, and that's when they started to see more money come out of it. And that's who they started catering to more than anything.
Hey, Brian, we've got to say so long for tonight. I do want to thank you so much for joining us. Continued success, and I look forward to the next time you and I meet back here in the X Zone.
Thanks for having me on, Rob. I appreciate it.
Take care, Brian. Brian Touhy has been my guest. His website, www.disastergovernment.com. I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news at 6.5 minutes past the top of the hour as the X Zone continues from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. My name is Rob McConnell. I'll see you on the other side of the news.